Hello and welcome to IBTimes TV. I'm Leanna Brinded, Senior Business Journalist for International Business Times. Joining me now is Daniel Byles, Conservative MP. He's also the chair of the APPG Group for Unconventional Oil and Gas and is also on the Energy and Climate Change Select Committee. So hi Dan, thanks for joining us.
No, you're welcome.
Unconventional gas is undoubtedly a game changer when it comes to the energy complex, specifically as well for the US, which has really harnessed the reserves out there.
Well, Fatih Birol, the chief economist of the IEA, has described it as the most important development since the Second World War after nuclear power. So.
Absolutely. So what would you say are the main, important reasons for the UK developing an unconventional gas industry of its own?
Okay, I think the whole shale gas phenomenon is potentially very, very exciting. But one of the problems we've got at the moment is it does tend to lead to a lot of hyperbole on both sides of the argument. There are some people who say that unconventional gas is going to be this huge game changer, will become a new Jerusalem of gas. There are other people who say it's going to be disastrous environmentally, for example. And as with most of these issues, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. What I'm quite excited about is it looks like the UK might well be one of the most shale gas rich countries on the planet in terms of the total resource available. So I think it's an absolute no-brainer that we should have a look to see whether that's a resource that we can exploit and that we can exploit safely for our economic advantage. And at the moment, that's what I'm pushing for, that we should be exploring and we should be asking the questions about, is this gas economically recoverable and can we use it safely?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the energy security, how do you see this feeding into that story? Because, of course, we've got one of the biggest demands when it comes to gas, especially since UK storage facilities aren't, I suppose, up to scratch as a lot of other countries.
Absolutely. I mean, not that long ago, we were self-sufficient in gas and we were a net exporter. We also didn't need the same sort of gas storage facilities that other European countries had, precisely because the North Sea was, in effect, our storage. We could literally ramp up and down production as required in order to help with fluctuations. North Sea gas is declining, it's declining rapidly. It's been estimated that we're going to be importing up to 80% of our gas in a relatively short period of time. And even under the most optimistic decarbonisation scenarios going forward, we're going to still need to be using a lot of gas for a long time to come. I mean, let's not forget, we use a lot of gas in domestic home heating. It's not just about generating electricity. So one of my concerns here is, it's not about how much gas do we use, it's about where do we get that gas from. And clearly, you mentioned energy security. Clearly, getting that gas from a reliable domestic source has to be better than importing it from Norway, Qatar, or even, God forbid, Russia.
Well, surely as well. I mean, this sounds like great news in terms of employment and growth in industry. How do you see it improving employment prospects, whether it's production, exploration, or even maintenance in terms of jobs?
Well, considering there might be more unconventional gas available onshore than there is in the North Sea, and look at what the North Sea gas industry has done in terms of GDP growth and in terms of jobs over the last 30 or so years. We've got the potential for a similar industry onshore. The Institute of Directors have estimated, up to 30,000 jobs could be created in a new domestic onshore gas industry. And I know that they're doing more research, and in fact, later this year, they're going to be publishing another report in a lot more detail of what a domestic shale gas industry and supply chain and associated jobs and benefits, etc., might look like. So, it's potentially very exciting. But I do keep urging this note of caution that at the moment, in the last 18 months, we haven't even drilled a single exploratory well. So the British Geological Survey tell us that there's a lot of gas there, but there's still a lot of work to go before we know just how much of it might be economically and safely accessible.
Well, ever since the UK government lifted that fracking ban in December last year, 2013 really is tipped to be a linchpin moment for development. What do you see as the major turning points or milestones when it comes to developing unconventional gas in the UK?
It's very hard to put dates on it. I mean, I think nobody's claiming this is going to be an overnight success. There's a long way to go. At the moment, we've had 2 exploratory wells drilled, that's all. Then we've had quite a long period of pause where drilling was not allowed while they were looking into the seismology issues. But it does seem to me that the kind of the linchpin, as you put it, or the turning points are going to be political. We're pretty sure the gas is there. The companies tell us that technologically they're pretty sure they can get at it and get at it safely. And the Royal Society agree that it can be got at safely, provided certain safeguards are put in place. So I think we're now reaching the stage where the stumbling blocks are political. It's basically, do we have the political will, both nationally and locally, to permit companies such as Cuadrilla and iGas and Ecor and others to go and start drilling the wells and accessing the gas?
I mean, that's a good point on the political stumbling blocks. But with the APPG group, surely that means that there's cross-party support for this sector. All parties are saying that there is this need for unconventional gas in order to secure energy for the UK.
I'd just like to be clear about the purpose of the all-party group. We have over 50 parliamentarians, peers and MPs, are members of the group. They are not all delighted at the prospect of exploiting shale gas. The purpose behind the group is to get to the facts. It is not a cheerleader for shale gas as such. The purpose behind the group is to cut through the rhetoric on both sides of the argument and say, well, what are the actual facts here, so we can make hard-headed decisions based on truth and not based on rhetoric. So not every member of the group is necessarily in favour of developing domestic shale gas. But you are right. At the top level, there's broad consensus. We have Conservative and Labour ministers and shadow ministers basically saying we should take the next steps and we should explore fracking and shale gas opportunities domestically. And of course, the Secretary of State for Energy is a Liberal Democrat, and he's the one who lifted the ban. So I would say at the national government level, there's a green light for industry to go and start to answer some of these questions that we need answering. I think the biggest stumbling block at the moment is arguably local, in terms of local planning permissions, local councils, the areas where they're actually going to have to host shale gas pads. And I would say personally that there are probably two onuses now on the fledgling shale gas industry in order to free up potential objections locally. I think one are fears about environmental impact. You know, there are very legitimate fears about what this okay, it's not specifically new, but slightly unknown and slightly uncertain term, fracking, you know, what it really means, what the impacts are going to be on local communities. And I think there is an onus on industry to reassure local communities that they are going to be transparent, that they're going to be open about the fracking fluids they use, that sort of thing, and that communities can be confident that the environmental impacts are going to be controlled. I think the second issue locally is actually a common problem, not just to shale gas, but to onshore wind and nuclear and other industries as well, which is about what's in it for the community. Why should a local community allow a company to come and drill a shale gas pad? Well, just as why should they allow an onshore wind farm, for example, to be constructed next to their village? And that's about community benefit. Local communities have to benefit from this industry and from this development. And if they don't, well, quite frankly, why should they say yes to drilling in their neighbourhoods?
But do you find, following the environmental argument, of course, that geological survey actually showed that 2 tremors resulted from fracking last year. I mean, that obviously provides a lot of support to some of the environmentalists out there who are looking for the ban to be reinstated. Do you see that as derailing a lot of development in terms of
well, it certainly slowed things down. I mean, you know, during the last 18 months, we haven't drilled a single hole, and in that time, thousands of new wells have been drilled and put into production in the US, for example. So, but actually, you know, was it wrong to stop and make sure that this is a problem that can be managed? No, it probably wasn't, because confidence and reassurance is really important. But I was very struck by the Royal Society report last year, which was commissioned by the government to look at exactly this issue. And they concluded that the seismology associated with fracking is no worse than that of coal mining, for example. So it then begs the question, are we going to hold the shale gas industry to higher standards in this sort of area than we do to existing industries such as coal mining? I've got a coal mine in my constituency. There's a village above it where they regularly suffer minor subsidence and cracking to walls, etc. You know, it's a problem associated with mining in general, and there are rules in place for the company involved to put right any damage that's caused, and those rules are enshrined in legislation. And as long as we have tough rules associated with shale gas development to make sure that anybody who does suffer any minor damage from some sort of seismology, you know, sort of incident, then you know, I don't see why that should be a showstopper any more than it stops us digging coal.
Of course, tougher legislation would give people more confidence in hydraulic fracturing or fracking. However, do you see this as an issue that people just still can't overcome?
Just let's not over egg this tremor issue. You know, the 2 earthquakes that were there that happened were virtually undetectable, you know, without instruments, and they've been put on the lines of a lorry driving past outside, slightly shuttering the windows. You know, and there was no reported damage by them. So, you know, yes, it's an issue that needs to be looked at, but I think people can get hung up on this. I mean, coming back to the nub of your question, really, which is about, you know, environmental concerns generally, I think there are arguably 2 principal concerns about shale gas development and fracking. One are the specific environmental impacts of fracking, and it's right that that's looked at, and it's right that those are regulated with tough environmental regulations. The other is the bigger picture of global warming and emissions in general. And there are those who argue that, well, you know, we're supposed to be reducing emissions. Why do we want an industry that digs out more fossil fuels? I can understand that. I'm sensitive to those arguments. I've got two replies to it, really. One is, I've already alluded to the fact that the UK is going to continue using gas. This isn't about do we use gas. It's about where we get it from. It's about import substitution. It's about using domestic gas that can be extracted under tough regulations that are under our control, and not importing gas from nations where we have less control over how the environmental sort of robustness of how it's actually dug out. As somebody put it to me, somebody who's quite anti-shale gas put it to me, it's probably better domestically digging out shale gas and relying on Putin's gas, imported in terms of environmental regulation. The other counter-argument is, in terms of emissions, the elephant in the room right now is not gas, it's coal. The IEA estimate 600 gigawatts of new, unabated coal-fired generation is going to come online between now and 2035. And that's because coal is currently cheaper than gas. Well, it seems to me that it doesn't take the brains of an archbishop to work out that if shale gas can, in the long run, make gas more competitive with coal, actually that's going to have a beneficial impact on emissions globally.
Yeah, and so, I mean, moving forward, we've obviously covered all the different challenges that the industry face in the UK in terms of getting exploration and development out there. So there are quite a few challenges for the industry to really leap over before we get into proper exploration, development and then production for unconventional gas. So at least for the short term in 2013, what would you say would be the major milestones when it comes to government support and, of course, on the company side for development?
Well, yes, I think in terms of what we're looking for, as in sort of milestones this year, all eyes really are on planning, permission and local applications. Cuadrilla are the company who are furthest ahead with this. They've got a number of outstanding planning permissions in line. And so to see what happens there is very, very interesting, because I do think local politics could be the bigger hurdle than national politics in terms of political objections. In terms of government help, the new Office of Unconventional Oil and Gas is in the process of being set up. I've got a meeting, I think, in about 2 weeks' time with DEC to discuss what that might look like, and other stakeholders are being invited to discuss what the Office of Unconventional Oil and Gas might look like and exactly how its remit will work. I think that's going to be very important for bringing together all the different sort of regulatory bodies, into a single voice that can discuss with industry sensibly what environmental regulation should look like going forward. And then, of course, we've got the fiscal regime. The government have already announced that they're going to bring in beneficial fiscal regime, basically tax breaks for domestic shale gas. And I'm hoping that in the budget coming up in a few weeks' time, we'll see a bit more detail about what that might look like. One Treasury Minister put it to me in a remarkable sort of view of the dynamic impact of taxes that you don't normally get from Treasury officials, where they said, right now we get no tax at all from shale gas because none's being dug out. So actually introducing a tax break to enable the shale gas industry to get off the ground is a win-win, because we'd rather get some tax from some gas than lots of tax from no gas.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
That was Daniel Byles, Conservative MP.